Ghost Hunting in New England,
your favorite spooky podcast. Hello and happy Wednesday. Welcome to Ghost Hunting in New England. I'm your host, Amelia. And today we are going to do something very, very interesting because I'm here in studio with Allison and Dan from the Fairbanks House over in Dedham, Massachusetts. So welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having us.
I'm very happy to be here.
So let's get started. Now, this is an extremely old property, correct? Well, hold on. First of all, what is at the extremely old property? What is your positions there?
So I am the program coordinator. I do educational programming for all ages. I do a lot of kids programming, but really for everybody, historically themed activities and stuff like that.
Cool.
And I'm the curator. The easiest way to explain what I do is I take care of everything and I know what everything is.
Perfect. So you are the best people to talk to, I guess, then.
Like to think so.
So I had known nothing about this house. I didn't know it existed. I mean, history is not always my best thing. I'm interested in it, but I'm not like a buff. However, my cousin Beth, who everyone listening knows, she is. And she had us go to a lecture that you gave at the Norwood Library on the house. And it was fascinating. And we had a wonderful time. And it ended. And we looked at each other and we were like, we have to get them on the show. So if you guys could just start by telling us a little bit of the history of the house. So it was built when, 1647?
1637.
Okay,
yeah. The house was built in 1637 for Jonathan and Grace Fairbanks, who were a couple that came here from Yorkshire, England. And they actually brought 6 children and 2 indentured servants with them from England. As was rare back in the day, all of them survived. And so the house went through 8 generations of the Fairbanks family. The last person moved out in 1904, a woman named Rebecca Fairbanks. So the house was lived in for 267 years, all by one family. And actually the family does still own the house today. They're the ones who own and operate the museum.
Well, and part of that is, you had said you had never heard of it. And that's actually one of the things we're working to change because it isn't super well known in the historic community. And part of that is because it is still owned by the family, which has amazing upsides to it because, again, it's been in the family this whole time. We have artifacts dating from, it's incredible. It's been a museum longer than most houses have existed even. But because the first, 7-8 decades of it being a museum, it was basically just run by whatever family member wanted to look after it. It wasn't run as a professional museum. It used to kind of be like, this is the family homestead that people are allowed to come look at if they want. But it's only recently that this is a public museum, even if it is owned by a private genealogical society, it is a public nonprofit. So, that's part of why we're trying to get more people aware of it, because what I don't think has been mentioned yet is that this is the oldest wooden structure still standing in all of North America.
Which is amazing.
Right. And so, people think like, there must be older something. No, it's nothing confirmed to be older than 1637. And by confirmed, I mean dendrochronology was done, which is tree ring dating. So they literally could take core of the center beam, the summer beam of the house, and actually tell exactly what year the tree was felled. And, and back then they used green wood, so it would have been built the same time the tree was felled. And so that's why we know for a fact it was 1637.
Yeah. It has been scientifically confirmed that it was built in 1637.
If you've ever been to the house, a lot of people are confused. It says 1636 on the chimney because the family thought it was 1636 because that's what year Jonathan was deeded the land. There's a bunch of other houses. I'm not going to name names, but there's a couple I know specifically who also claim to be 1636. And they say, we're also those, but in terms of tree ring dating, of science, ours was proven to be 1637, and these couple other houses are from the houses themselves are the 1650s, 1670s at the earliest. Everyone used to just go off of, when were you deeded the property? And we were tied with a lot of other people, but then science came along and proved us the oldest, which we're very proud of.
Yes.
And how has it survived so long?
Yeah, I always like to say there's 3 things that have kept the house standing this long. It was incredibly well built to begin with. Family didn't try to build it themselves. They hired professionals right from the beginning. The family has, from a very early age, understood what they had and wanted to protect it. And third, and probably most importantly, blind luck. There has never been a major fire. There's never been a tree falling over onto the house during a hurricane. Even when the family had misfortunes in the mid-1800s, they hit a rough patch and they were fairly poor. At least the branch of the family still living in the house was. And the 1800s, of course, are what most people refer to as the Victorian era. And Victorians were into bigger, better, newer, fancier. Who cares if it's old or historic? Tear it down, build a nicer one. So while everyone else was doing that, the Fairbanks still living in the house could just afford to maintain what they already had. You know, even when bad things happened to the family, they ended up, in the long run, having a silver lining.
Well, I mean, it was terrible for people who lived there in the early 1900s, but it was so fortunate for us because, as Dan was saying, the Victorians ruined everything. When it comes to history, the Victorians ruined everything. So any other houses that are first period houses, meaning mid-1600s, have been updated. So during the Victorian era or more recently, they have had lots of changes made because of new technologies like plumbing and electricity, and also because of like building codes. But the Fairbanks House became a museum in 1904. So already that was before a lot of the things that would change a lot of houses. So the Victorians, the people living there in the Victorian era, couldn't afford to change it. And then it became a museum before it would have undergone a lot of other changes. So the house has never had heat, electricity, plumbing. It is still in the same condition and look that it was in 1801, which is amazing and makes it incredibly unique because even other houses that are close to that old have been far more modernized.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, and one other thing about the house that's really amazing. So most historic houses, when the family moves out, they take their stuff with them. And whoever comes in to make it a museum later has to find things to furnish the house. When the last Fairbanks, again, Rebecca, moved out, she just took a couple of prized possessions with her and left the house as is.
Wow.
So everything that is in the house, or most of what's in the house today, has been there since family actually lived in the house. Some of it dating all the way back to the 1600s, the majority of it from the late 17 to early 1800s.
And of course, that ties in with a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight, because certainly people think ghosts or spirits can be attached to a place. They could also be attached to objects. So we have objects that have always belonged to members of the Fairbanks family that have been in this house for centuries. So, I mean, it's pretty much prime ground for historical and paranormal activity, basically.
Normally we offer, regular, historic tours, and then in the fall we have special tours just about the ghosts. But one thing I say on the ghost tours is, it's a house that was lived in for 267 years, and that was all before hospitals. Everyone except the first generation was born in that house, and everybody except the last generation died in that house. And 8 generations. So if there's any place that's haunted, it's going to be that one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's incredible. I really liked the story about when you first realized it was kind of haunted. Do you guys want to talk about that?
Yeah.
So sure. I guess the first thing to mention is that Dan and I are married, and we live on site. Yes. So the Fairbanks House, the museum, well, it's never been modernized, in 1912, on the same property, literally 10 feet away from the museum, a Sears and Roebuck kit house was put up. And that has been fully modernized, fortunately, with electricity and plumbing and everything.
And central air.
And central air. But upstairs is the museum offices, and the first floor is our apartment. So we do live on site at the museum. And the only electricity in the museum was a little bit was wired in there just for the security system. Yeah. Just, because insurance-wise, and there had to be security. So there are motion sensors in the house, but the panel that controls them is in our apartment. Because the whole point of the Sears and Roebuck kit house being built was to have someone to be able to monitor the museum at all times. Mm-hmm. Dan's always been a believer. I was unsure. I was like a believer, but also I didn't want to be a believer because it scared the bejesus out of me. So I was like, no, I'm sure things don't exist. It's fine. And when Dan first got the job, everyone told us, oh yeah, no, there's nothing here.
Yeah. So when I was applying for the job, I got an interview and they're showing me around the house, and I specifically asked, so 400-year-old house, almost 400-year-old house, any ghosts? And they're like, no, it's no ghosts anywhere. As I said, okay, that's actually kind of weird with a house this old, but all right.
And Dan has experience. He used to give ghost tours in Boston.
Yeah, so I've done this stuff before.
He had a history in it.
Yeah. And so that part of why I thought to ask. And so I thought it was weird that there's no haunting, sure, in a 400-year-old house, nothing. And then I accept the job, and we move in, and within the first 2 weeks, everybody I talked to was like, hey, let me tell you about the ghosts. I was like, what? You said there weren't any. I guess they were worried about scaring us off, but again, I have experience with this. Allison was a little less sure about it after we heard about it.
It was a good thing they didn't tell me till after we had already paid the moving company.
So, yeah.
I wouldn't have been as
a little more
okay
hesitant, at least. So anyway, we're about 2 weeks in. We're still settling in. I'm still getting the hang of the job. We're still getting the hang of the house. People have been telling all these stories, and so one night we're getting ready for bed. It's a little late. It's like 1 a.m. We're about to go to sleep, and we're talking about maybe not the best choice of topic for this time of night, but time of night. But
this was the first time we had been talking about it. So people had been telling him stories at work. Yeah. He was telling me. So this is the first time since we lived in the house that we were discussing paranormal activity in the museum.
Right. And so I'm relaying all these stories to her, and I get to one that was told to me by the prior curator, that apparently the ghosts in the house can set off those motion alarms if they want to. And as I'm telling her about this, the motion alarm goes off. And
for the first time since we moved in.
Yeah, so it's the first time we've even heard it. And of course, again, the panel's there, and so is the alarm in our apartment. And so I go over and check, and it says it was a second-story room. No external alarms, no first-floor alarms, just a second-story room.
So in other words, there's alarm. If any doors or windows had been opened, that would have been a separate alarm.
Yeah.
This was literally just saying there's movement in the room upstairs.
Yeah, with no other movement. Yeah. And so, again, I'm still new there, and I'm still not sure what to do. So I turn off the alarm. I look out the window, and I don't see anything happening, and I turn it back on. And it doesn't go off again. And I decide, you know what? It's probably fine. I'll check in the morning.
He and I, for like half an hour, we're like, we should probably go check, right? I'm like, it's like 1:30. Like, no, don't go out there. This is how all the horror movies start.
Yeah, right?
Do not go at 1:30 in the morning to check out the mysterious,
Yeah, so what really got me interested in looking at this further and eventually led to the ghost tours was that alarm would go off roughly once every week or two, always between 1 and 3 a.m., and it stopped about a week after I gave the first ghost tour.
And it's worth noting, the motion sensors are about knee height.
Yeah, the lowest ones are knee height.
A chipmunk, a squirrel could not have set this off.
Set it off.
It would have to be an animal big enough that we would see signs of a huge animal. Not to mention the fact that animals don't keep a schedule. Like you're not gonna have a raccoon.
It wouldn't always be between 1 and 3. Yeah.
This raccoon always comes through at 2:30 in the morning. Like no, that doesn't. But yeah. So there's no way it was an animal setting off the motion alarm every time. Because a lot of people say, I'm sure it was just, a squirrel, but it wouldn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah, the timing of it and the positioning wouldn't happen that way. The alarm doesn't go off on us anymore, except, so we're only open May through October, because as we said, there's no heat or electricity. You do not want a tour of the Fairbanks house in January. So we're only open half the year. And so, but I have no problem, we have no problems with the alarms until April, when it's been 5 or 6 months since I've talked about any Fairbanks. The alarm will go off. And actually, I think last year I actually went into the house and just said out loud, I know I haven't talked about you in a while. We're opening soon. I'll talk about you again. Please stop setting off the alarm. And it stopped going off again.
That's awesome.
So that's the 1 to 3 a.m. alarm. I will say the alarm has gone off a couple other times. There's been, once or twice in 3.5 years of living there that maybe it was just like a glitch or something. Mm-hmm. But the majority, if it's not between 1 and 3 a.m., there's been several other times the alarm has gone off. And it's almost always when we haven't been home all day. Because we get, it doesn't seem to go off unless it's between 1 and 3 a.m. It doesn't go off while we're just sitting around at home. We get a call from the security company saying, the alarm is going off. Is everything okay? And it's always after we haven't been around for a whole day, or if we're on vacation, we go away to visit his family and, we haven't been home in several days, and we have to call, one of the board members who lives nearby and say, can you go check it out? And everything's always fine. But the ghosts, they get a little antsy, not only if you haven't been talking about them, but also if they feel like there's no one there to be watching the house. They figure out, hey, pay attention. You need to be looking after the house better.
Well, that's something I tell people who look nervous about taking the ghost tour. Some people just hear it's haunted and don't want to take even the regular tour. But I tell them our ghosts are friendly. Nobody's ever been hurt or attacked. They're just here to watch over the house.